I'm a 27-year-old woman hitched to Jake, who's 29, for the past 4 years, though we've been in each other's lives for 8. Half a year into our relationship, Jake introduced me to his clan. While most of them gave me the thumbs up, his mom, Karen, who's 55, didn't share the sentiment. Karen has always been a bit off with me. It's clear she's not my biggest fan, and she's made no secret of it. Though she's never been outright nasty, her strategy has been more about avoidance and minimal conversation whenever I'm around. Last week, with Jake out of town on a business retreat, a total digital detox kind where phones and outside communication were off limits, I was writing solo at home. We all knew reaching him would be impossible for a few days. Then, on day 4 of his absence, Karen made an unexpected appearance at my doorstep, but she wasn't alone. She brought along 2 kids, both under 10, faces I had never seen before, who remained silent throughout their visit. Describing her visit as a mere drop-by would be understating it. She persistently rang the doorbell until I reluctantly swung the door open. Karen stormed into my house, 2 silent kids in her wake, and exited just as furiously. I scrambled to intercept her, desperate for some explanation about this bizarre intrusion, but she was already peeling away in her car before I could utter a word. There I was, stranded with 2 kids who seemed to have taken a vow of silence around me. Attempts to coax out their identities or any hint of their parents were futile. They might as well have been mute in my presence. The thought to call CPS crossed my mind, but something held me back, a gut feeling that these children were somehow linked to my husband's family. Somehow. I couldn't place it, but both the kids looked familiar to me for some reason while I was trying to figure out why they seemed related. So that's why I didn't call CPS and instead chose to call my husband. I told the receptionist at their resort that I needed to speak to my husband, urgent, late, and within a few minutes I was on the phone with him, explaining everything that had happened. Jake dropped the bomb he'd be back in just a few hours and clicked off. There I was, stuck in a silent standoff with these mystery kids until he could make his grand return. The retreat wasn't a million miles away, just a 4-hour drive from our place. Those hours stretched on forever, with the kids doing their best to pretend I was invisible, while I kept my eyes glued to them, not daring to even think about a bathroom break. No way was I going to lose sight of them, not even for a second. The moment Jake walked through the door, I pulled him aside, spilling everything about how these kids were giving me the silent treatment, whispering secrets to each other but not breathing a word to me, careful enough to not let me overhear a word. This was very weird and secretive behavior from 2 kids. So I was feeling very paranoid and was on the verge of calling CPS, but Jake stopped me and told me that he'd called his mother over to explain, so whatever we needed to do, we could do after we confronted Karen. I'd been trying to get through to Karen the entire time I was at home, but she'd been ignoring all my calls. However, when Jake had called her half an hour before he reached home, she'd answered and had told him that she'd come over and explain in a while. So after around an hour, Karen arrived once more, and this time, she had a lot of other people with her too. When Karen showed up, it was like she decided to bring the entire cavalry, my father-in-law, Jake's older brother who's 32, and his wife included. I was baffled by her decision to turn our doorstep into a family reunion, especially with the added mystery of the kids. Everyone's faces mirrored my confusion. Jake, however, stepped up to the plate, confronting his mom directly about the kids, who by this point were practically shrinking into the furniture with anxiety. It was clear as day that Karen's presence was what was sending them into a state of panic. The moment Jake questioned his mom about who these kids were, she dropped a bombshell, claiming they were mine without a hint of hesitation. I was floored. What was all I could manage? After all, Jake and I had been clear about our child-free stance, with the distant possibility of adoption down the line. This was a curveball I hadn't seen coming. That had always been the deal. So I was shocked at Karen's allegation, and so was the rest of the family. Jake told her to cut it out because obviously we thought that she was joking, but she doubled down on what she said and started off with some completely fictional story. Apparently 3 weeks ago, she'd be in contact with by some random man who told her that I was his ex-girlfriend. I'd been dating this guy for years, and even had 2 kids with him during the course of our relationship. But once I got married, I cut him off and abandoned those kids as well before ghosting him. Now that he'd found me after several years of stalking, he tried to contact me, but I just blocked him again, so he'd been left with no other option but to contact my family. Turns out, Karen was the grand architect behind this mess. She claimed the kids had been left with her by their supposed dad, who pegged me as the mom. Her goal? To expose me as a cheater and a liar in a dramatic family showdown. As she spun this wild tale, I was speechless, my jaw practically on the floor, while she wove her elaborate web of deceit. After her tirade, Karen laid down her next bombshell to Jake, insisting that since these were allegedly my kids, it was now our responsibility to take them in and raise them, given their dad had apparently abandoned them. Jake, seeing right through her facade, outright rejected her claims and demanded she take the kids and leave, confident in his belief that she was fabricating the entire story. Despite Jake's firm stance, the rest of the family wasn't as quick to dismiss Karen's narrative, leaving us caught in a whirlwind of disbelief and family drama. They did think that my mother-in-law was telling the tea Karen and so insisted that we take care of them. Well, maybe they did know that Karen was lying, but just didn't want to take up the responsibility of raising 2 random kids, and so they were pushing them onto us. There was a lot of shouting and yelling during the argument that came next, and eventually Jake told them that we'd keep the kids with us for just a day for their sake, but after that, if Karen didn't come and take them, then he'd call CPS. All of this time the kids were in the room with us, but as soon as CPS was mentioned, they ran to another room and somehow managed to lock themselves in while screaming in terror that they didn't want anyone to come and take them away. Seizing the moment, my in-laws made a swift exit, leaving Jake and I to deal with the kids, who were understandably shaken by the whole ordeal. We spent the next 30 minutes doing our best to soothe their fears, reassuring them that no one was going to snatch them away. Gradually they began to open up to us, a small victory evidenced by their willingness to communicate and the red tear-streaked eyes that greeted us when they finally felt safe enough to look at us. We managed to settle them into the guest room for the night, tucking them into bed before retreating to our own room, utterly drained by the day's chaos. That night Jake and I barely exchanged words. The exhaustion was too profound, leaving us to fall into a restless sleep without unraveling the day's mysterious events. It wasn't until the next morning, after catching our breath, that we could finally sit down and contemplate our next steps concerning the kids. We couldn't take care of them forever because that had never been in the cards anyway, but we couldn't call CPS either, because apparently they were terrified of that idea. While we were brainstorming, Jake said something about how it would help so much if there was some proof that Karen had brought the kids here. Finally, when he said that, I was reminded of the security footage from the cameras that I'd installed outside in the panic and hubbub of the previous day. I'd completely forgotten about the security cameras and that I could actually use that footage to prove that Karen had brought the kids here. Honestly, the security cameras around our house had become more of a forgotten relic than a tool we actively used. It hadn't even crossed our minds to check them until Jake brought it up. With a sudden spark of remembrance, we scrambled to our laptop, eager to sift through the footage for any clues to this bewildering situation. What we discovered on playback was nothing short of shocking. The video captured Karen, cold and deliberate, exiting her vehicle with the 2 children in tow, forcefully leading them to our doorstep. It was then that the unexpected unfolded. One of the kids, the younger one, attempted a desperate dash for freedom, squirming to escape Karen's grasp. However, she quickly reasserted her control, not merely pulling him back, but shaking him with alarming violence. The older child, witnessing his siblings' harsh treatment, stepped in, pleading for Karen to cease her actions. In response, without a moment's hesitation, Karen turned and delivered a sharp slap across his face. The footage laid bare a disturbing display of aggression, far removed from the misunderstanding we had hoped might explain the day's chaos. I gasped because the slap looked like it had hurt, and it finally made sense that they were cowering in fear when they saw Ruth in the house once more, when she came by to argue with us. Jake was just as shocked as I was, and we realized that the reason that the kids hadn't been speaking had probably also been because of Karen. She'd instructed them not to talk, and that's why they kept to themselves. We realized immediately that something fishy was going on and wanted to call the cops or CPS, but the kids' terrified faces when we mentioned them the previous day were haunting us, so we didn't. Instead, we called a friend of ours who was a cop and informed him about what was going on, and he's the one who advised us to post the security footage on our social media. For one, it would help us prove that it was Karen who'd brought the kids along with her, and secondly, the kids were definitely not ours, but whoever's kids these were, they might be looking for them. Karen wasn't a kidnapper, and she definitely wouldn't have abducted 2 kids if she'd taken these kids away from someone and they'd given them up. The revelation from the security footage hinted at a darker reality, that the kids' actual parents were likely entangled in something dubious and were probably evading the law. In light of Karen's attempt to frame me, Jake and I felt we had no choice but to share the footage online, not out of expectation for a resolution, but to clear my name from the accusations Karen had orchestrated. We uploaded the video of Karen forcefully leading the kids to our door, and it wasn't long before our community reacted. My brother-in-law extended an apology, recognizing the gravity of Karen's actions, though Jake's father stayed silent, siding with Karen. Karen's only response was a threat to sue us for defamation unless we took down the video, a challenge we met head-on, refusing to be intimidated. Karen has yet to follow through on her legal threats, and in the meantime, the kids have settled in a bit, sharing their names, but remaining tight-lipped about anything more personal. The silence from other family members lingered until yesterday, when my father-in-law finally reached out. I had half expected an apology, but the call was anything but. But when we answered, he was screaming at us for ruining his marriage and that we were the reason he was going to have to get divorced at his age. Neither of us had any idea what he was talking about, so we called Jake's brother instead, who told us too. After we posted that clip online, Karen and Jake's dad had been fighting like cats and dogs every single day, and things have finally come to a head. Yesterday, when Ruth and her husband had yet another fight at the end of which Karen told him that she wanted to divorce now. She'd even left the house and gone somewhere else to stay for a while, but hadn't told anyone where she was now. My father-in-law was pissed at us for some reason because he thinks that us posting the footage is what led to all these fights. Air to air for posting the footage of my mother-in-law dropping 2 unknown kids at my doorstep after she accused me of cheating and said those kids were mine. Update 1. Hey everyone, so big update here. We finally found out who these kids really are and why exactly. My in-laws are getting divorced. It's crazy for Jake and I right now, and I'm hoping saying this out loud might help me make sense of things. Turns out the kids are indeed related to Karen, but not in the way anyone expected. In a twist straight out of a soap opera, it was revealed that Karen had an affair early in her marriage, leading to a pregnancy. Following the birth, a paternity test confirmed the child was her affair partner's, not her husband's. Karen persuaded her husband to put the baby up for adoption under the guise that she couldn't handle raising a 3rd child at nearly 30, with her having been 28 at the time. Karen's husband, torn but ultimately acquiescing, agreed to the adoption, believing Karen's argument that as the primary caregiver, it wouldn't be fair to burden her with a child she wasn't prepared to raise. Behind his back, Karen facilitated the adoption of her daughter, born from the affair, when the baby was just 6 months old. Karen continued her affair until her lover passed away from a stroke 2 years prior, effectively deceiving her husband for over 28 years. All the while, she maintained contact with her daughter, the mother of the 2 children aged 5 and 7, left on our doorstep. That's also why the kids look so familiar, because they had the same dark hair and eyes that my mother-in-law and her daughter had also inherited from her. Her daughter had never been married and had both these kids with her boyfriend, but her boyfriend had dumped her about 2 months ago and now she was struggling to make ends meet. Unfortunately, Karen's daughter had a drug problem and so did her boyfriend. So her grandkids have grown up in fear of anything to do with the law and recognized the word CPS or cops very well because of the fear they associated it with. Thanks to Karen's threats, whenever she would visit her daughter, Karen would constantly threaten to call CPS on them and have their kids taken away. But her daughter and her boyfriend would beg her not to do anything of the sort and managed to evade it every time. And they'd even train their kids to run to the other room and cry whenever she would say those words, which is something I would personally witness the other day. However, after her breakup, her daughter's drug problem had become worse due to the grief, and she was barely functioning anymore. Karen's daughter was in dire straits, unable to care for herself or her children, and hadn't been to her job at the local grocery store for weeks, eventually leading to her termination. With no income and dwindling resources, Karen faced a grim reality. Her daughter and grandchildren were in a crisis. In a desperate move, Karen left the children with me and Jake and checked her daughter into rehab, a decision that forced her to reveal the long-concealed to Karen to her husband. She needed his financial support for her daughter's treatment, yet she had no funds of her own. The revelation sparked a fierce argument between Karen and her husband, during which harsh words were exchanged. Despite the conflict, Karen declared she would manage the rehab expenses without burdening him and announced her intention to divorce. In the aftermath, she took refuge with Jake's older brother, her whereabouts kept secret from us until now. She extracted a promise of silence from him, aiming to keep her estranged husband in the dark a little longer. Karen, now separated from her husband and living with her stepson, is said to be in a state of profound emotional turmoil, grappling with the consequences of her actions and the unraveling of her family's fabric. It's been almost 4 days since she's been living with them, and they've been lying to Ray's dad because they don't want him to find out. Karen has told him the T. Karen as well, which is how we found out, because Jake's brother finally broke up today and ended up telling us the T. Karen about the kids and even showed us pictures to prove it. My father-in-law has been miserable ever since Karen left, and Jake has been visiting him every day to make sure he's all right. The kids are still with me and they're doing a lot better, but still refuse to talk about their parents, which now I understand. It sucks for them, but I have decided to take care of them until their mother is out of rehab, or at least I have a better place to go to update to. So it's been 2 weeks since my original post, and my in-laws decided to get back together today. Officially, the divorce is off now. They made up a few days ago when Jake's dad went over to visit his oldest son to ask if they'd been in touch with Karen and found her there. They talked about everything, and Karen convinced him that she'd only loved the other guy, her former partner in the initial years. But after that, her life had been all about her husband. She'd only been in touch with him because of their daughter and no other reason, and he believes her. He's decided to give her another chance and work on their marriage for real this time. Navigating this family saga leaves us in a peculiar spot, caught between concern and the realization that ultimately, these are not our burdens to bear. Jake is equally perplexed, grappling with the weight of familial ties versus the need for boundaries. At my urging, we've decided against confronting his parents about the unfolding drama. They are adults after all, navigating their own complex journey. My feelings towards Karen remain unchanged. Distrust and disapproval color my perception of her. For the sake of our peace, Jake and I agree that minimal contact with her is best for now. The children, unexpectedly thrust into our lives, will soon leave our care. Jake's brother has stepped up to take them in, a decision prompted by my imminent return to full-time work as a teacher. Despite the initial silence regarding their parents, the kids gradually warmed up to us, sharing bits and pieces of their world. Their chatter and laughter have filled our home, offering glimpses of comfort and safety we hope they felt in our presence. As they prepare to leave, it's bittersweet. We didn't anticipate how much we'd grow to care for them, nor how much we'd miss their lively spirits. I trust Jake's brother. They're good people, but a little too naive for their own good. I've made them promise not to leave the kids alone around Ruth, and they agreed because the way she lost her temper with the kids that she dropped them off at my place was scary to watch. And had their biological mother been around to take care of them, she probably would have called the cops on Karen for the way she'd been treating those kids. We've been trying to familiarize the kids with Jake's brother and his wife for a while before they move in with them, and it's going well so far, so we hope that it continues even after they move out. Update 3. Hey everyone, the kids have been living with my brother-in-law and his wife for a week now, and they're doing relatively well. They've started going to the public school nearby too, and are a lot happier and more bubbly than when they first arrived. My sister-in-law was a stay-at-home wife before, so she's also quite happy with this new arrangement. Jake and I have been in no contact with Ruth ever since the day she dropped the kids off at my place and accused me of being a cheater when she's been the actual cheater all along. We can forgive the cheating, but we cannot forgive the very intentional attempt to ruin my marriage and dump her grandkids onto me. She could have gone to my brother-in-law if she really cared about the kids, but she cared more about ruining my image and marriage. So she came to me first. I'm lucky that Jake is a trusting husband and a good man who didn't just believe his mother blindly while she was saying all those things about me. Our marriage is hanging by a thread, and honestly, it's a miracle we're still together. Jake's still talking to his dad, who's in turmoil over choosing to stick with Karen despite her cheating spree. Jake's torn up about it, wishing he could step in but knowing it's not his place, especially since I'm dead set against stirring more drama. He's fuming over Karen's actions, labeling her as possibly the worst mom ever, a title she's earned by letting down all her kids as adults. Jake's itching for a showdown, but I'm putting my foot down. No confrontations. As far as I'm concerned, Karen might as well be a ghost. I want nothing to do with her. No calls, no visits, no updates. She's cut off. She's a nasty piece of work who's tried to ruin my relationship with my husband and in-laws once already, and I'm not about to let her do that once again. My father-in-law has since apologized to me for not believing in me. When Karen made up that story about me and for blaming Jake and me for posting the footage of Karen mistreating the children. But I don't buy it. I don't think someone can just change their mind overnight, and I don't want anything to do with him either. Jake can keep in touch with him, but I don't think I'll be attending any holiday parties hosted by my in-laws anytime soon. So it's been a little over 3 months, and my half-sister-in-law, Karen's other daughter, was finally released from rehab 2 weeks ago. The saga continues with my brother-in-law and his wife stepping up as foster parents to the kids, a setup that's looking like a long-term commitment. Why? Because Karen's other daughter, despite being the biological mom, isn't ready to take on the mantle of parenthood. And here's where it gets even more bizarre. She's shacking up with Karen and my father-in-law, turning their home into a live-in reminder of past infidelities. To me, the whole arrangement is unfathomable. I don't possess the monumental capacity for forgiveness that seems to run in their family. Or perhaps I'm just too principled to overlook Betcha Keel. The idea that this setup is somehow functional for them boggles my mind. As for us, we're maintaining our distance, a decision made easy by Karen's inexcusable actions. She's persona non grata in our lives, and we intend to keep it that way. She's tried several times to reach out to Jake again, but my husband loves me too much to even consider speaking to that woman again. But I love him for that. Jake's also been telling me that the kids are probably going to get adopted by his brothers soon enough because they've grown too attached to the kids. And since their father doesn't want them anymore, and their mother isn't capable of raising them, it'll probably be easier for them to get custody as well. No legal steps have been taken yet, but I'm crossing my fingers they secure custody of the kids soon. Honestly, it's the best outcome those kids could hope for given the circumstances.